Duet Night Abyss was among my honorable mentions list for my most anticipated gacha games of 2025. This upcoming highly action-intensive brawler with co-op and shooter elements has been the topic of quite a lot of talk in the past couple months. After having the privilege of participating in the second closed beta test, I want to share some of my initial thoughts after playing for a few days regarding the game's mechanics, gacha system, progression, and overall quality. For full disclosure, this is a sponsored video. However, given that the game is not fully released, there's absolutely things I'm allowed to critique and bring up to improve on. This is a disclaimer that all content shown in this video is CBT 2 and may not represent the final quality. My name is Psyche, and let's see what Duet Night Abyss is all about. We'll start from the beginning. As I was greeted by the introduction cutscene, a question that was lingering in my mind as I loaded up the game for the first time was, what makes Duet Night Abyss different from the crowd? What's the reason I would spend my time playing this instead of any other gacha game in the market? Well, the longer I played, the more its unique take on the open world elements have grown on me. First, you get to pick between the male or female protagonist. I originally thought this played out just like any other gacha game, where your protagonist is just the self-insert and that who you pick has no impact on the story. Except in Duet Night Abyss, it actually kinda does. The protagonists you choose are not siblings, friends, or even alternate versions of themselves. They're actually two completely separate people with different backgrounds. It's actually the reason that the name of the game is called Duet Night Abyss. This dual narrative approach will have you play as the other protagonist in their own chapter when you get far enough in the story. Also, you know how there's usually multiple dialogue options in some gacha games that don't actually have any impact? Well, in DNA, it sometimes does. You have stats akin to something like personality traits, and whenever you select a dialogue option, it can increase one of your stats. Then, when you explore the open world and come across certain side quests or purchasing certain shop items, the game will then perform a check on a particular stat. The higher it is, the higher the chance of success. This means that your experiences playing will most certainly differ from another player, who either got lucky or unlucky with the checks or diverted their personality traits differently. Duet Night Abyss plays with a degree of freedom and mobility I've never seen in an action gacha game before. The most apt comparison people have made in the past is Warframe. Basically, you can equip a character with both a melee and ranged weapon at the same time, and they can be used interchangeably in different situations. Like if an enemy is preparing a big slam attack, then you can get some distance and start blasting away with your gun. There's also a dodge, double jump, and special forward jump motion called the helix leap, where the height of the jump is determined by where your cursor is looking. You might imagine that bouncing around the environment would drain up your stamina fast, except in DNA, there is no stamina system. You can maneuver around as much as you please. This actually has a fairly big impact on combat, since you will be required to move around constantly to get better angles of attack or dodging from enemy fire. With combinations of moves that I never thought were possible, such as combining a helix leap with a melee strike for a slam attack, or how the game will let you hover slightly in midair if you go the ranged option. Now, there's still a dodge cooldown, so you can't just be invincibility frames forever, but movement feels way less restrictive in Duet Night Abyss, and it's clear the combat system plays to its strengths with this in mind. Due to the wide degree of mobility, I'm curious to see how the environment designs get factored into exploration or challenge content. Your skills will require energy to use, but I found that most of them have virtually no cooldown, at most a few seconds. The reason is that you'll often be facing hordes of enemies, and vials that can refill your ammo, health, or energy will drop as you defeat them. So you're in a way jumping right into the heat of battle and fighting to maintain your damage output. In other words, you can use up energy quickly, but you can also gain it quickly. You can level up and summon 2 other allies controlled by AI if you play single player, 1 additional ally if you're playing duels, and no allies if all 3 players are already in the same level. Given that DNA is more geared towards a co-op experience, there'll be plenty of ways for players to work together. However, if you're more comfortable with going solo, there's safeguards in place to make sure you can still get a little help from your roster. You progress by completing commissions. Each commission has a different objective. For example, I play one where you have to defeat a boss at the end of the map, but defeating up to 3 optional bosses will make the level easier, such as spawning jump pads to move around freely, a debuff on the final boss challenge, and so on. You get more resources by completing the commission with a shorter clear time. You can also double up on rewards by doubling the expenditure of stamina. The relic system in DNA is called Demon Wedges. There are characters and weapon wedges. You can use any character wedge for any character, but not on weapons, and vice versa. What's different about the Demon Wedge system is that each wedge has fixed stats, meaning that it will always give a specific set of stats with no variation. Each character and weapon has a tolerance gauge that can be increased by leveling up. In each wedge will use up tolerance, with the ones of higher rarity consuming more. Something else I found is that you can actually equip the same demon wedge on multiple characters. You got a nice relic that multiple units would want? Well, just slap it on everyone in your party. So they're not restricted to only being equipped on one character. The way I see it, there's more freedom in equipping and farming the demon wedges, and it's more about complementing the build you want, as I can see a lot of ways different playstyles can be expressed with the same character. Farming demon wedges and certain weekly boss drops don't actually require stamina, but will need a ticket currency to determine the number of rewards. Now, I haven't been able to progress all the way until endgame, though I can see cases where you can just save up a lot of these vouchers and farm everything at once instead of being forced to come back every day. Now, let's briefly go over the gacha system. The gameplay has a lot of mobility and variety, but how can we recruit new characters to the roster? Here's how Duet Night Abyss's gacha system works. Characters are split into 4 and 5-star rarities. The base chance for a 5-star to drop is 0.6%, with a hard pity at 90 pulls. The default rate-up chance is 50%. However, there is a separate tab lurking to the left side of the banner, called the Destined Chrono Summons. Yes, you read the label correctly. This version of the banner features a 100% rate-up chance for the featured character. Sounds too good to be true, so what's the catch? Well, it only applies to the first time the rate-up banner unit is pulled, so after you get one copy, the Destined Chrono tab disappears and you have to revert back to the 50-50 odds. However, aside from that, nothing about the gacha rules have changed. You still have the same pity counter and the same base rates. This is incredibly generous to free-to-plays and low spenders. Considering that if you're someone that only typically pulls one copy of newly released characters like me, this is a big plus. There is a beginner banner available where the pulls are 20% off and you're able to select a 5-star of your choice after 40 pulls. Even though you'll be pulling for a maximum of 50 times, it's realistically the price of 40 pulls given the discount. The feature weapon, on the other hand, always has a 100% rate up, so you're guaranteed to get the weapon you want. The base chance for a 5-star weapon is 0.8%. However, where DNA goes one step further is that you can actually bypass the gacha here, and just farm for the weapon instead. There is a mechanic where if you're able to collect the weapon blueprint and its parts, you can just craft it. And this even extends out to the event limited ones. That's pretty insane. I can only count with the fingers on one hand the amount of gacha games that let you do this. So to circle back to that original question, why play this instead of other gacha games? Well, one aspect I found very unique is the build variety you can do with characters. Because of how freely you can exchange weapons and demon wedges around, there's many ways to express your preferred gameplay. Plus, the guaranteed rate-up chance for your first 5-star on a banner and crafted weapons lifts a lot of the burden on free-to-plays and low spenders. All the characters feel different to play and have some solid designs, like this character whose name is Psyche. Guess I know who I'm gonna be maining. In terms of the world design, I would have loved to see more variation in the environments, though I understand that this is a closed beta and there's still things to be worked on. But when the game wants you to appreciate the visuals, you really feel it. My most honest thoughts is that the overall progression of the game is on the grindier side, but the grind feels fair, allowing you to bypass the weapon gacha, no stamina consumption for weekly bosses or demon wedge farming. I think there's plenty of ways a casual player like myself can play the game and still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But if you're someone that prefers the grind, you're also rewarded by playing more of the game you already enjoy. Given that this is still a closed beta test, I do think the game optimization and animation fluidity could still use some more work. But in terms of the gameplay loop, I see something very special here. You got all sorts of mission types that's suitable to be played by both single-player or co-op parties, and the foundation of the game feels very strong in this beta test. All they would have to do is polish what's already present. So thank you for joining me today for this brief overview of the closed beta test for Duet Night Abyss. If the game has caught your attention, be sure to use my link in the description to pre-register for the game, and their socials will be linked below as well. And if you want to catch more gacha-related content like this, you know what to do. As always, thank you for watching, and have fun out there.